A howling wind once threatened to bury Kayla Moore under the ruthless Wyoming winter. But the moment Levi Garrett stormed into her ranch house, defying both snowdrifts and her stubborn pride, everything changed. Now prepare for the most dramatic twist yet. A fresh disaster looms on the eve of their long-awaited success. Will Kayla's newly healed leg and Levi's unwavering resolve be enough to overcome another deadly challenge? You won't want to miss the tense standoff that forces them to risk everything they've built. Before we jump back into the heart of this tale, remember to subscribe to our channel right now. By subscribing, you'll never miss a moment of grit, romance, and ultimate triumph. And trust us, you'll want to see how this formidable duo handles the next storm heading straight for the Moore Garrett Ranch. Stay tuned because the final outcome proves that even the harshest trials can forge an unbreakable bond. Kayla Moore never envisioned that she might face her own end within the walls of the home she loved. Yet there she was, leg mangled from a terrible fall, while the punishing Wyoming winter battered her modest ranch house. Each day she saw her supplies dwindle, a few desolate jars of beans, a single stack of tinder for the stove, and no strength left in her injured leg to make the ride to town. Alone and hungry, Kayla found it difficult to sleep at night, her mind tangled in the fear that help would never come. The ranch had once been her late father, Gregory Moore's pride and joy, a legacy Kayla had vowed to maintain against all odds. Now the biting wind hammered relentlessly and the temperature sank lower every hour. She had to ration what little wood she had left, spending her days in the kitchen, the only room she dared to keep heated. She'd measure out her meager portions of flour and coffee with the same precision she used when handling the ranch accounts in better times. Yet no matter how carefully she counted the numbers spelled out, the same threat, the avalanche of hunger, would soon bury her if the cold did not finish the job first. Late afternoons found Kayla in her father's old rocking chair, physically and mentally exhausted. The battered pocket watch in her hand ticked steadily, counting down her fate. She'd inherited it from Gregory, who had insisted it be wound daily. Time is everything, he used to say, tapping the watch with a weathered finger. When it runs out, so do our chances. Those words felt cruelly prophetic now. As the storms howled and the watch's seconds marched on, she tried to focus on each tick, as though somehow timing her breath with the watch might grant her the extra moments she needed to last until rescue. But the watch was no charm against the scowling wind, and each new gust rattled the windows, reminding her how fragile her situation was. 3 months had passed since the accident. A midday fence inspection turned catastrophic when Kayla's horse reared at the sight of a rattlesnake. Thrown and slammed into a rocky incline, she'd felt her legs snap with a sickening sound. Despite the agony, her grit and father's memory had propelled her to crawl back mile by mile to the ranch house. The local doctor did all he could, but lacking advanced medical facilities. Kayla's leg never healed properly. Now, as the vicious winter set in, she had only a poorly healed fracture and a battered crutch that sank too easily into snowdrifts, leaving her effectively trapped indoors. Her solitary pride had once been a source of strength. She believed fiercely that the Moore Ranch, built from the blood and sweat of her family, deserved her devotion even if it killed her. Indeed, her sister Linda in Boston had pleaded for Kayla to come back east rather than face the winter alone. Kayla had refused, unwilling to abandon the ranch so soon after Gregory's passing, unwilling to accept that she couldn't handle it on her own. As the winter storms worsened, she realized with growing dread that perhaps she wasn't as capable as she'd hoped. On certain nights, that realization hollowed her from within, leaving her staring into the dark, pondering the bleak question, would anyone even know if she ran out of food or froze in her sleep? Levi Garrett stood at the panoramic window of his den, arms crossed, watching his ranch hands hurry back and forth as they secured the herd for the next onslaught of winter. The Crescent Ranch was a fortress of preparedness. The barns were stuffed with hay. Each horse had a warm stall, and each worker had a bed in the bunkhouse. Levi's success had earned him a reputation as both the wealthiest rancher in the territory and one of the kindest. He recognized early in life that if you have resources, you share them, an ethos that was about to be tested more than ever before. His foreman, Toby Bridger, knocked gently on the door and stepped inside carrying a telegram that looked urgent. "Boss, you need to see this," Toby said, his face betraying concern. Levi opened the telegram and read the hastily written lines. Kayla Moore stuck at ranch, injured low on supplies, storm coming. Signed by Dave Parker, the neighbor who had once visited Kayla and found her reluctant to accept help. Levi's jaw tightened. He'd heard rumors about Kayla's predicament, but had assumed she'd accept assistance by now. The telegram proved otherwise. Her ranch was off the beaten path, and with an improperly healed leg, she'd be in real trouble. Damn it all. Levi muttered, tossing the paper onto his massive oak desk. 5 years ago, his sister Miranda had met her end in a similar scenario, too stubborn to ask for help in a crippling winter. By the time Levi discovered her plight, it was far too late. He'd carried that guilt around like a branding mark on his heart, vowing never to let pride cost another life, if he could prevent it. Without hesitation, he turned to Toby's saddle, iron, gather winter gear, and prep medical supplies. I'm riding out, I'll do this alone. Toby's eyes widened. A lone boss, the wind's going to be savage, and you might not see a foot ahead. You sure about this? Levi simply nodded. I lost Miranda to a storm like this. I won't lose someone else, Toby. Not if there's any chance I can save her. The statement was final. Toby recognized that tone. Once Levi Garrett set his mind to something, the matter was closed. Still concern crept into Toby's voice as he said, let me at least send a couple of the younger men with you. But Levi refused. If anything happened to them, he'd never forgive himself. He preferred to risk only his life for Kayla Moore's sake. As Toby hurried off, Levi began collecting everything he might need. In his study's drawers lay an array of bandages, antiseptics, and even morphine. He'd added these to his traveling kit after Miranda's tragedy. A battered canteen and packs of pemmican completed his supplies. Cook, hearing the commotion, rushed in to slip him some warming broth in sealed jars. Take it, Mr. Garrett, she insisted, her eyes moist with worry. You'll need it, and so will she, if you find her hurting. Levi gently placed a hand on her shoulder in thanks, steeling himself for the unholy conditions outside. Minutes later, Levi descended the grand steps of his ranch house, thick coat and gloves already dusted with snow. Iron, his massive bay stallion, stood, stamping in the yard, exhaling clouds of steam. Toby gave one last attempt at persuading him to wait until the storm receded. All it takes is one slip in the dark, and you might never be found. The foreman pushed in. Levi's only answer was a determined grunt and a curt nod. He swung into the saddle, the grit in his eyes fueled by memories of Miranda. As the wind howled, he guided Iron out beyond the tall gates of Crescent G, disappearing into a white fog of swirling flakes, toward a woman who probably had no idea he was coming. Kayla Moore woke from a light doze to find her world whiter than before. The windows were fully frosted, letting in barely any of the afternoon sun. She tried to stand, but her fractured legs sent a bolt of pain through her body, nearly causing her to collapse. Gritting her teeth, she used the edge of the table to stabilize herself, a trick she'd learned in those first agonizing weeks post-accident. Outside, the wind's moans sharpened, rattling the window panes like an angry ghost. The gloom inside her house felt like a presence, reminding her how little remained both in her pantry and in her prospects. Despite her shaking hands, she managed to pour some water into a dented pot. As she placed it on the wood-burning stove, a wave of dizziness made the room spin. The single piece of wood she'd added that morning was almost burned out, and she dared not waste another. She needed to keep at least one log for the night. Come on, she murmured to the water, urging it to boil faster so she could have some sort of warm meal. Even if it was just watery broth or thin coffee, it was better than the gnawing emptiness. As she sat back down, Kayla's gaze landed on a letter from Linda. She'd opened it the previous day, but couldn't bear to read it fully. Linda, safe in Boston's gentler climate, would be urging her again to surrender to hop a train east. But the Moore Ranch was Kayla's inheritance and her pride. To leave it, especially while it was on the brink of failing, felt like betraying Gregory Moore's memory. How am I any less of a traitor if I starve to death here, she muttered. The thought had haunted her for days. Pride and fear warred inside her, neither giving ground. Pride told her to endure fear, whispered that she wouldn't last another week. Tremors of cold overtook her, forcing her to shuffle closer to the stove. The meltdown from earlier in the day had sapped her energy, and her leg pulsed with renewed agony. She pressed a hand against her brow, feeling the heat of a fever. Ice in her veins, fire in her head. It was an impossible combination that left her delirious and desperate. In a clumsy motion, she reached for the tin of pain reliever powder, a meager pinch left from the doctor's last visit. She swallowed it with a grimace, praying it might dull her throbbing bones. She nearly missed the momentary hush that fell outside. The wind slackened just for a moment, and Kayla heard, or thought she heard, the distant sound of hoofbeats. Her heart surged. Oh, she whispered, half disbelieving. Who would come now? Part of her wanted to rush to the door, but her rational mind insisted it was just the wind's trick. She closed her eyes, exhaustion threatening to pull her under. If someone was out there, a miracle was on the way. But miracles rarely visited these parts. A short while later, the wind picked up again, louder and more vicious, blasting swirling snow against the walls. The meager pot on the stove hissed as it struggled to warm. Kayla locked her jaw, swallowing her despair. Her father's watch ticked on the table, a traitorous reminder that time was marching forward, unconcerned with her fate. She recalled how Gregory had once said, "The ranch can be harsh, Kayla, but if your heart's in the right place, it'll reward you." She'd believed that wholeheartedly, always counting on resilience to see her through. Now, on the brink of her final store of strength, she wondered if the ranch had finally demanded more than she had left to give. Iron's flank trembled under Levi's guiding hand, reflecting the horse's own battle with the chest-deep drifts. Each step forward was an argument against nature, the wind charging at them with intangible fury. Levi's scarf had iced over and his eyebrows were rimmed with frost. But he pressed on, remembering the compass Toby had given him. He pulled it from his pocket, wiping away the crust of ice that threatened to freeze it shut. The needle pointed steadily, true north. Levi oriented himself, once more searching for Dave Parker's last note about the landmarks near Kayla's place. A distinctive rock formation shaped like a hawk's head, then a long slope down to the Moore Ranch boundary. The hawk's head formation finally came into view around a white swirl, massive and unmistakable. Relief spurred Levi to nudge Iron down the slope. If the map in his head was right, the ranch house would be a half-mile from the base of that slope. The wind howled in a mocking tone, as if furious that he'd gotten this far. For a moment, he pictured Kayla's house as he imagined it, dark, silent, and dangerously cold. He urged Iron onward, silently praying for one more burst of the horse's strength. A large shape emerged from the storm. Something man-made. Levi's heart hammered. Was it a barn? A fence, the house itself. Drawing closer, he realized it was the barn, half buried in drifting snow. Beyond it loomed the shadow of a small house. He slid from Iron's saddle, patting the stallion's neck. "We've made it," he murmured. The horse snorted, exhausted but still standing. Levi led Iron into the barn, finding it dreadfully cold inside, but at least offering a break from the gale. The wind's roar diminished slightly behind the barn doors, which were half off their hinges. He quickly spread the horse blanket he'd brought, uncinched the saddle, and gave Iron a handful of oats from his bag. The horse deserved more, but there was no time. Inside the house lay Kayla Moore alone and perhaps minutes from death, with a final pat to Iron's flank. Levi braved the storm for the short dash to the house's front door. Snow had piled waist-high against it. Summoning what remained of his energy, he slammed his shoulder into the door. It refused to budge at first, but on the third try, the ice around it cracked, and the door flew open, sending a powdery avalanche across the threshold. Levi stumbled into the dark interior, shouting, "Kayla Moore! It's Levi Garrett. Are you here?" His voice bounced off empty rooms. The only answer, a deafening silence. Panic rose in his throat as he swung the lantern around. Furniture shadows, the faint shape of a stove. Then he spotted something on the kitchen floor. A lump or shape that could be a person. Levi's heart seized as he rushed over, lantern held high. Kayla Moore lay crumpled, half buried in a scattering of cold ash from the stove. Her face was colorless, her lips faintly blue. He dropped to his knees, fear spiking Kayla. No answer. Her eyes were barely open, and her skin had the lifeless chill of deep hypothermia. "Not again," he choked out, remembering Miranda. Not this time. He pressed 2 fingers to the hollow of Kayla's neck and felt an astonishingly weak but present pulse. Relief and urgency warred in his chest. Without hesitation, he scooped Kayla into his arms, her body limp as a rag. The hush that fell was the hush of determination. He shut out every memory of failing. His sister blocked out the howling wind and the frost that clung to his coat. "I'm here," he whispered to Kayla's barely conscious form. "And I'm not leaving." Levi worked quickly, aware that every second was precious. Kayla was breathing shallowly, her breath laced with a faint rattle. He peeled off her soaked jacket and boots, ignoring the guilt and embarrassment that might come when she recovered her senses. Right now, saving her life outweighed any propriety. He stripped away her damp clothes and replaced them with blankets from his travel pack, layering them to trap her fading warmth. The stove was stone cold. No sign of a living flame. "You must have been out of wood," Levi murmured, pulling out his tinder and matches. He'd kept them near his chest so they were still dry. Within minutes, he had a small fire flickering in the stove, coaxing it with gentle puffs of air until the flames caught hold of the remaining logs. As the stove's heat crept through the room, Levi tore open his medical kit. He recognized the early onset of frostbite in Kayla's fingertips, the blanching of her knuckles. He rubbed them gently, not too vigorously. He'd learned the hard way that rough warming caused more damage. Her lips parted in a soft moan as her eyes fluttered. "You'll be all right," he said softly, lifting a cup of broth to them. "Just try a sip." She swallowed reflexively, a sign that her body still had some fight left. The broth was tepid, but it was better than nothing. Each swallow seemed to help giving color back to her cheeks, bit by bit. Kayla's head rolled slightly and she tried to focus on him. Levi Garrett, she whispered, voice cracking, eyes hazy. In the flesh, he confirmed, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. He checked her pulse again, satisfied it was stronger than before. "Shh, rest, you've done enough." She gave the slightest nod, her eyelids fluttering closed once more. Levi exhaled, relief pouring through him. She was stable for now. When he judged the fire safe enough to maintain on its own, Levi ventured outside to gather more wood. He found a meager stack near the back door, half buried under snow. Cursing softly at the pitiful supply, he carried it inside. He'd have to fetch more from the barn, or chop up some fence rails if it came to that. He also rummaged the kitchen, noting the near-empty pantry. A tin of flour-dried beans that would maybe make 2 meals, and that was it. His gut tightened. This woman had been days away from dying, maybe hours, and she still insisted on no outside help. Returning to Kayla's side, he checked her fever with a borrowed thermometer from his kit. It was high, but not spiking. "Thank God," he muttered, brushing her hair from her forehead. The lines of strain etched into her face made him wonder how she'd managed this long. The Kayla he'd heard about was legendary for her horse breeding, sense, and ranch management. But pride could kill as sure as any bullet. But not today, he told her unconscious form, not on my watch. As evening fell, he maneuvered Kayla onto a small cot in the adjacent room where the stove's warmth could reach. Throughout the process, she barely stirred. Levi lit lanterns, took stock of the house. He found her personal ledger on a side table covered in dust. A single page was dog-eared to a list. Remaining firewood, 3 pieces. Remaining food, so 2 days. That final entry glared like an epitaph. Grim satisfaction filled him. He'd arrived just in time, or perhaps mere moments too late. But she was alive now, for which he could only feel immense relief. He set the ledger aside, determined that when Kayla woke, she'd see there was a future beyond those dire numbers. A future he was set on making sure she lived to experience. Kayla's dreams wove in and out scenes of her father's weathered face on branding day, Linda's letters stacked in the corner, and a distant memory of an old family dog curled by the fireplace. Through it all drifted the faint, firm voice of Levi Garrett. She awoke in darkness, except for the flicker of a lamp. The immediate sensations were overwhelming, a throbbing leg dryness in her throat, and a weighty warmth from layered blankets. For a moment, confusion reigned until her gaze settled on the broad-shouldered figure kneeling to stoke the stove's embers. "You're awake," Levi said gently, hearing her stir. He brought over a small tin cup which smelled like broth. "Drink." She swallowed a few sips, enough to clear the fuzziness from her mind. The salt and faint spices of the broth spread warmth through her chest. Kayla tried to piece it together, Levi Garrett. The storm, her collapsed form in the cold. It swirled together like a dream she wasn't sure was real. "Why are you here?" she managed, her voice still rasping. Levi's expression was a mix of compassion and wry humor. "Got a telegram from Dave Parker. Said you might need a hand. Couldn't sit at home while the storm closed in on you." She blinked at him, suspicion warring with relief. "Plenty of folks wrote. I never asked for help," he nodded, returning the tin to the small side table. "I know. Doesn't mean you didn't need it. Doesn't mean I couldn't offer." Silence weighed heavily, punctuated by the crackling of the fire. Kayla inhaled, trying to quell the complicated swirl of emotions. Resentment that he had seen her in such a vulnerable state. Gratitude for the rescue, shame that she'd let pride push her to the brink. She tried to shift, but the movement sent pain flaring through her leg, forcing her to hiss in discomfort. Levi was beside her, instantly adjusting the blankets. "Steady." The leg's in a rough shape. "I had to resplint it, probably not perfect, but enough to keep it stable until we can get a real doc here." Her cheeks flushed. "I appreciate it," she whispered. She must have looked so pathetic, must have smelled like fear and sweat and desperation. Yet Levi's gaze held no judgment. Instead, it held only concern. "I also cleared out your barn a bit," he continued quietly. "Got your horses, fed and watered." "They're fine, Kayla." The tension in her shoulders eased at that news. "Thank you," she said, voice catching. Those horses were the last anchor to her father's dream, and she'd nearly failed them as well. "I guess I do owe you for that." Levi settled into a wooden chair next to her. "You don't owe me anything." Let's just say I have some experience with folks who'd rather freeze than ask for help. The mention of that memory seemed to weigh on him, an echo of sorrow in his tone. Kayla closed her eyes, remembering rumors of Levi's sister's tragic end. Her heart twisted in sympathy. I'm sorry about your sister, she offered softly. Guess we both know how pride can kill if we're not careful. He glanced up sharply, meeting her gaze. Yes, we do. But that's behind us now. Let's focus on you getting stronger. The storm's not letting up yet, so we'll be bunkered here for a while. I brought enough supplies for the short term. After that, we'll figure something out together. A gentle hush fell. Outside, the wind still roared, shaking the eaves in a vain attempt to intrude. But inside the stove radiated warmth, and Kayla felt a thread of strength returning. For the first time in weeks, she breathed a little easier. Her life had teetered on the brink, but fate and Levi Garrett had intervened. The question now was whether she'd accept this second chance or let old habits drive her away from the very help that might save not just her life, but her ranch as well. 3 days later, the storm finally broke, leaving a crystalline world of snowdrifts and icicles that sparkled under a frigid sun. Kayla, propped up on the couch that Levi had dragged closer to the stove, peered through the frosted window at the new landscape. She couldn't help but marvel that she was still alive to see it. Her legs still ached, but the fever had subsided, replaced by a slow but steady recovery. Levi bustled about the kitchen, ignoring her mild protests as he prepared a modest breakfast of biscuits and coffee. With the supplies he'd brought, the pantry no longer resembled a tomb of empty jars. You really shouldn't be doing all the cooking, Kayla said, though her growling stomach betrayed how grateful she was. Levi shot her a half smile, an expression she was beginning to find oddly comforting. And let you hobble around on that leg just so I can watch you collapse again. Don't think so. I've got 2 working legs. Might as well use them. She exhaled, reminded once more how her independence had been forcibly sidelined by circumstance. I'm not used to this, she admitted, voice dipping lower. Never thought I'd rely on a man I barely knew for survival. Levi's gaze softened. I don't think we're strangers anymore, Kayla. He brought her a steaming tin cup. The coffee's aroma instantly soothing. Besides, I suspect you'd do the same for me if the roles were reversed. She sipped carefully, letting the warmth seep through her. Truth, I would. The Moore Ranch might not have many assets left, but we're not lacking in hospitality. A faint grin touched Levi's lips. Hospitality, huh? Well, you're welcome to show me more of that once your pantry's restocked. He set a plate of biscuits and bacon on the small makeshift table beside her. The battered stove hissed, emanating enough heat to keep the space livable. Still, Kayla kept a thick blanket over her lap. Your men back at Crescent. They must be worried, she ventured. He shrugged, sipping his own coffee. They know I left word to wait. Toby's probably wearing a rut in the ranch yard from pacing. But he's also no fool. If I'm not back in a day or 2 more, I expect a search party. But for now, it's calmer outside. I might ride out tomorrow to let them know we're safe. A pang of loss startled Kayla. Safe, she was safe, and soon she'd be alone again. The ranch, her father's dream, remained in dire condition. Though the storms had battered more than just the house, the barn needed urgent repairs, the fences were half buried, and the livestock, though alive, would require ongoing care that Kayla still wasn't physically capable of. She forced her thoughts away from the gloom and latched onto the present moment, Levi at her side, the warmth of real coffee and the sense of comfort she'd never expected to find with a man who was by all accounts a wealthy stranger. How's my father's watch? She asked suddenly. She recalled losing it in the chaos when Levi had carried her from the kitchen floor. Levi reached into his coat pocket, pulling out the tarnished watch carefully. Still ticking. Just like you? He said, handing it to her. When I picked it up off the floor, I thought maybe it had stopped, but no, tough little thing. Just needed winding. Kayla cradled the watch in her palms, her father's voice ghosting through her memory. Time is everything. Kayla, don't waste it. The watch's steady tick felt like a second heartbeat in the quiet. She looked up at Levi, a dozen unspoken questions swirling in her mind. She wanted to ask about the rancher's gossip, about his sister's death, about the future. Instead, she pressed her lips together, uncertain. The words forming behind her eyes felt too large and unwieldy. Levi seemed to sense her hesitation and reached out to gently squeeze her shoulder. We've got time, he said, almost as though reading her mind. We'll figure out what's next, step by step. First, let's get you. Well, and for the moment, that was enough. In the days that followed, Kayla's leg grew stronger under Levi's diligent care. With each passing morning, she found herself able to stand a little longer. hobble a bit farther, and do more than watch from her chair. He in turn quietly ensured the stove never went out, that fresh water was always warmed for washing, and that the battered barn was checked regularly. So Kayla's beloved horses remained fed and sheltered. The unstoppable sense of winter gradually gave way to a few glimpses of sunlight, though the air still crackled with frost. One afternoon, while Levi was mending a broken table leg in the kitchen, Kayla tapped her cane and announced she wanted to see the barn for herself. Alarm flickered across Levi's face. "You sure about that?" he asked, setting aside the hammer. "It's a bit of a trek, and the snow's still thick." Kayla offered a wry smile. "I might be too proud for my own good, but I'm not suicidal. I'll go slow and steady, but I can't just sit here indefinitely." "The horses are my family." Next to the ranch itself, Levi stood crossing the room in 2 strides. "All right," he said gently, "but let's do it together." Armed with her cane and Levi's supportive arm, Kayla made her way out the door. The wind nipped at her cheeks, but at least it wasn't roaring like before. The sky remained a stark blue, marred by streaks of white clouds that hinted more snow might come, but not as violent a storm. Kayla inhaled deeply, the cold air biting her lungs but filling her with renewed determination. Each step in the snow required careful placement. She tested the ground with her cane while leaning slightly against Levi. Her breath plumed in front of her, and she could feel her heart pounding from the effort. Her leg ached, but it was a tolerable ache, not the agony that had nearly broken her spirit weeks prior. Inside the barn, she discovered the stalls, tidy fresh hay spread. Thunder and May, her favorite pair, nickered softly upon seeing her. "There, see," Levi said, guiding her gently. "They look good. You taught me well enough from your chair. I'm just following instructions." Kayla beamed as she stroked Thunder's muzzle. "Thank you," she murmured, voice thick with gratitude. Her animals were her pride and joy, and in their bright eyes she could see trust that she hadn't failed them. Maybe she had come close, but Levi's arrival had changed the final outcome. Levi busied himself checking the water trough, silent but present. It was something Kayla increasingly appreciated about him. He'd do what needed doing without fanfare. No lectures, no condescension, just steady, reliable help. In a corner of her mind, Kayla recalled a snippet of gossip from town that Levi's fortune was overshadowed only by his sense of duty. He was the type to refuse payment from folks in crisis, the type who'd help rebuild a widow's fence or pay a doctor's bill for a down-on-his-luck neighbor, all under the quiet assumption that it was simply the right thing to do. After a short while, Kayla's leg trembled from fatigue, and she allowed Levi to guide her back to the house. On the way, she paused to gaze at the battered fence line, remembering how she'd have tackled repairs alone in the past. Now, though the concept of letting someone share her burden seemed less foreign, maybe even welcome, the pain reminded her that while she might be more mobile, she wasn't out of the woods yet. "Don't push yourself too hard," Levi murmured, as if reading her thoughts. "You've made incredible strides, but healing takes time. The watch in her pocket ticked away a metronome for her new reality. Strangely, she felt that time was now on her side, or maybe it was that Levi Garrett, in bridging her needs and his abilities, had bought her the clock's forgiveness. She took comfort in that thought, leaning on him the last few steps to the porch, a sense of possibility tugging at her heart. It was the following Sunday morning when Dave Parker's rescue party finally arrived, 2 men on horseback, looks of astonishment marking their faces upon finding Levi Garrett already installed in Kayla's ranch house, as though he belonged there. Toby, who accompanied them, grinned from ear to ear at the sight of his boss, alive and well. Kayla sat on the couch, a borrowed crocheted shawl over her shoulders, greeting them with a polite nod, her leg propped on a stool. Toby gave Levi an exaggerated salute. "Took you long enough to send word, boss. We were about to come storming the place with half the county behind us." Levi shrugged, fighting a smirk. "Been a little busy making sure Ms. Moore recovers. Didn't want to leave her alone in case another storm hit." Dave Parker doffed his hat, relief lighting his eyes. "Ma'am, you gave us quite a scare. If Levi hadn't shown up." He trailed off, letting the implications hang. Kayla mustered a grateful but composed smile, ignoring the faint flush that touched her cheeks. "Appreciate your concern, Dave. I'm doing better. Thanks to Mr. Garrett's help." Toby and Dave exchanged knowing glances. They could sense a deeper story, but were far too polite to pry. Within the hour, Toby and Dave's men had loaded their pack horses with Levi's minimal traveling gear and left behind additional provisions, flour, sugar, salt, fresh coffee, and even a slab of bacon. Kayla, having recovered enough to stand for short periods, insisted on seeing them off on the porch. The foreman doffed his hat once more. "You sure you don't need anything else, Miss Moore?" She rested a hand on Levi's arm. Plenty here, she answered, her tone more certain than ever. Toby winked at Levi in farewell, and the small party vanished into the bright winter day, leaving behind a swirl of footprints. Inside, a hush filled the space as if the house was exhaling after the bustle of visitors. Kayla glanced around the kitchen, noticing how normal it felt to see Levi's jacket draped over a chair, his coffee mug beside hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his gaze gentle. She exhaled, letting a wave of realization wash over her. "I'm thinking about all the times I refused help from folks who offered neighbors, even that traveling preacher who came by in autumn. I always told them I was fine, wouldn't accept anything." Her voice caught, but I wasn't fine. Levi placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "It's tough to admit we can't do everything alone, trust me." "I know," she recalled his sister, a tragedy that had propelled him to ride into a blizzard for a woman he didn't know. "What's next, Levi?" she asked, noticing a surge of vulnerability in her own voice. The question carried weight, not just about the next day or the next storm, but about the next phase of their lives. "Well," he said, a flicker of a smile tugging at his mouth, "I'm not leaving you alone out here until I'm certain you can handle things fully. And that might be a while Toby can manage, Crescent G. The partnership arrangement we discussed is still on the table. We can combine resources, breeding programs and staff, all official, but only if you're in agreement." Her heart thumped. She was sure about one thing: she didn't want to return to the isolation that had almost killed her. Accepting Levi's help no longer felt like a weakness. It felt like the natural evolution of all she'd learned about survival, trust, and resilience. "Let's do it," she said softly, searching his face. "But not just for the ranch. If we're truly partners, I want to figure out what that means for us beyond the business side of things." Levi's warm gaze ignited a new kind of confidence in her. "I was hoping you'd say that." The final remnants of Kayla's fear dissolved in the strength of his steady presence. She realized that letting someone stand beside her, sharing burdens, was not a sign of failure. It was an affirmation of living. Greg Moore's watch ticked away on the table each second, marking a step away from the brink of oblivion and toward a future guided by two hearts forging a better path. If winter had tested them, spring would let them flourish together. 2 weeks later, Kayla Moore donned a thick coat and carefully navigated the uneven ranch yard on her carved cane, courtesy of Levi's unspoken craftsmanship. The stubborn drifts had mostly melted under the warming sun, revealing patches of earth poised to renew themselves. Levi strolled at her side, watchful but not overbearing. Today they were headed to the barn to check on the newly combined stock. Crescent G and Moore Ranch horses side by side, a visible sign of the partnership whose papers had just been officially filed. Kayla's heart pounded with anticipation. She still held the memory of signing that agreement only days ago, her hands steady as she joined her name next to Levi's. Yet the contract was more than a business arrangement. Unspoken but deeply felt was the knowledge that they were linking not just ranches but lives. She could sense the shift in each gesture, each moment they spent together. Levi's gazes were softer, her confidence stronger, each of them reflecting the other's resolve. As they neared the barn, the scent of hay and horses welcomed them, stirring Kayla's sense of belonging. This was her domain, improved by Levi's resources, but still uniquely hers, anchored in the legacy of Gregory Moore. Toby Bridger emerged, tipping his hat. "Mr. Garrett." "Miss Moore, sorry, I mean Mrs. Moore Garrett soon, I guess." A flush of color touched Kayla's cheeks. Word had spread quickly that something more than a corporate partnership was blossoming. She didn't mind. The ranch hands recognized that the synergy extended beyond ranch operations. "We'll see about name changes in time, Toby," Kayla replied, her voice light. "For now, it's just good to see everything running so smoothly." Toby grinned. "Yes, ma'am. The new feed schedule is working wonders. Storm damage is fixed, and we even have leftover lumber if you want expansions." Leaving Toby to oversee the final feed, Kayla and Levi entered the barn where a half-dozen pregnant mares awaited deliveries of new life each, a tangible sign of hope. Kayla pressed a gentle hand on one mare's neck, the horse huffed, eyes drooping in contentment. Levi looked on, arms loosely folded. "They sense you're calm," he observed. "Always had a gift for that." Kayla shrugged, smiling. "Maybe. Or maybe they just know we'll take care of them. That's how trust works, right? You show consistency, they show faith." Levi's eyes rested on her. "Could say the same for people." Emboldened, Kayla turned to face him. The hush in the barn wrapped them like a cocoon. "We never exactly defined what's next," she said quietly. "I know we have this business arrangement, the ranch partnership. But I want more than that, Levi. I want a future shared." Her statement, bold and honest, hung in the cool barn air. For a heartbeat, no sound but the soft shuffling of hooves. Then Levi stepped forward, brushing an errant strand of hair from Kayla's face. So do I, he breathed. This ranch, my ranch, all of it is better with you. I'm better with you. He kissed her, and she tasted the promise of open skies and hard-won resilience in that simple act. The horses shifted around them, a gentle chorus of acceptance. Kayla's cane clattered to the straw floor, but she barely registered it, the warmth of Levi's arms. A safer anchor. Eventually they parted, breath mingling in the quiet. The prickle of hay under her boots reminded Kayla of her leg once broken, but now healing, a testament to how even deep wounds can mend with care. She laughed softly. Who'd have guessed a year ago that a winter storm would change everything? Levi's answering laugh vibrated against her. Sometimes the worst storms bring the best blessings, even if it took nearly losing everything to realize how much we have to give. They lingered a while longer, discussing possible expansions, a new breeding wing for specialized lines, a bunkhouse for seasonal workers, maybe even a small schoolhouse for ranch families in the region. The scope no longer daunted Kayla. She had a partner whose unwavering presence had taught her that leaning on someone didn't diminish her worth. It elevated both. As they left the barn, arms loosely around each other's waists, Kayla paused to watch the afternoon sun glint off her carved cane. It was more than a walking aid. It was a symbol of second chances and newfound strength. The house up ahead seemed to shine with possibilities. The porch repaired, the windows bright. Inside, Gregory Moore's watch lay on the kitchen table, still ticking, marking each moment they seized, each plan they made, each promise they kept. And in that melding of ranch chores, healing hearts, and quiet devotion, Kayla and Levi had formed something bigger than themselves, a shared legacy that proved no winter is final and no stubborn heart is beyond the reach of trust and love. The fleeting memory of her darkest hour made her appreciate the light all the more. Side by side, they walked forward, knowing their future was not just about surviving storms, but about thriving in every season together. In the end, the blizzard arrived with fury, but this time Kayla and Levi were ready. Their barns, fortified from earlier hardships, held strong. Their teamwork, bolstered by shared responsibility and mutual respect, turned what might have been a catastrophe into just another challenge conquered. When the dawn after the storm revealed nothing but pristine drifts and safely sheltered livestock, an immense wave of relief and gratitude swept across the ranch. Kayla, leaning on her carved cane, realized her life no longer revolved around solitary struggles. It flourished on unity. Levi, his heart once burdened by past regrets, found renewed hope in every breath of crisp winter air. Side by side, they stood on the ranch's porch, watching the sunrise gild the snow, certain they could face anything as long as they faced it together. We want to hear your thoughts. Which moment struck you most? What do you think of Kayla and Levi's journey? Comment below and join the discussion. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more inspiring stories, because the best is yet to come.